Hi everyone, this is Rebekah Howerton, and joining me today is James Wester, the Research Director from IDC. Thanks for joining us today at NRF, James.
Thanks for having me up here today.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the retail evolution. And sitting where you sit at IDC, getting that front row seat, with your view of payments around the world, give us some of your impressions for how the industry has been evolving.
Oh gosh, big question. What's really interesting to me about what's going on, and NRF is a perfect example of it, is every year we think that this is it. We really understand where retail is. We understand what the limits of possibilities are. So for a company like a Verifone, this is what we need to plan for. This is what retailers are going to want to do in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years. And then something happens. We see something introduced like IoT, AI, chatbots, and we have to start preparing for all of those things. And so what's interesting to me is that transaction, that simple, I walk in as a customer, I pay a merchant, that has been going on literally for eons, is now sitting at the middle of so many different intersections of technology, of interactions, not even just between customer and merchant, but between merchant and logistics, or merchant and maybe an ERP solution or CRM, or all of these different things are all coming together around that transaction. And the layers that we keep building on top of that, it's just amazing to me. We haven't reached the end of what we need to know just to make simple plans for the next 2 to 5 years.
So we just finished a record-breaking holiday season. So as consumers have been driving that demand for mobile payments, mobile in-store payments, how do you see the retail industry as a whole really to give us the back-end security? How do you see that evolving, especially with IoT?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's interesting you bring that up. Yes, we had this record-breaking retail. 2, 3, 4 years ago, retail's dead. Nobody's ever going to shop in a store again. Now it's about, okay, how are retailers actually integrating new channels like mobile, online, IoT, AI, chatbots? How are they actually doing all that? And so now we're seeing retailers coming back with real strategies on how do you compete against online only? How do you compete against low price, convenience, anywhere, anytime that consumers demand? And so they're figuring these things out. The question you asked about security is, I think that's one of the big clouds that still hangs over it, because security is a part of everything. It's a part of every one of the discussions because it's so intrinsic to payments. Everybody expects payments to be completely secure, completely reliable, with no worry about that. And I think one of the big things that we still have not quite figured out, that we really need to figure out, and quickly, is how do we scale all of that security when it comes to IoT is a perfect example. IDC is predicting 30 billion devices by 2020. How many of those devices are going to be smart meters or smart cars or things that are going to represent you and me and access financial institutions? Probably many of them. And how we actually assign an identity to that device, how do we secure that that identity is one that I want to assign to it? We understand how to do it, but do we understand how to do that at scale? And I think that's going to be a big issue that we need to address very, very soon. And I'm not certain that we understand what that means. We only understand the downside, which is nobody wants to be associated with a breach, nobody wants to be associated with bad things happening. So I think that's the next big thing that we have to deal with.
Yeah. So in a sense, your identity can soon become a form of currency.
Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it.
So, let's talk about some of the roadblocks like PSD2. Do you see it as, some of those regulatory roadblocks? Is it, challenge? Is it an opportunity, or kind of a mix of both?
Probably a mix of both. I mean, regulation used to traditionally lagged innovation. You would have an innovation, regulators would say, this goes too far, this is how we need to regulate it once we understand it. Now what you're beginning to see with things in Europe like PSD2 or even GDPR is regulators saying, we know what we want to encourage. We want to encourage third parties. We want to encourage open access. We want to encourage consumer ownership of data. That's all well and good, but just like I said in the first answer, we thought we knew the limits of what we knew and what we need to know. Innovation doesn't wait. Innovation isn't one of those things that says, okay, we know everything we need, now here you go, regulator. So I think that there is a real potential for regulators to overreach. I think there's a real potential for regulators to think they know what the best course is when in fact they could possibly, clamp down on things where a smart tech company might come in and create something that they simply can't because it's now regulated. So I think that's one of the things that we as an industry need to continue to do, and I know NRF's been good about this. I know there are several industry groups that have been very good with making sure that regulators understand kind of unique complexities about payments and the way that payments work. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge, I think, for the industry.
Yeah. So I follow you on Twitter. You're kind of a big deal on Twitter.
Not at all. You're very nice. You're very nice. Anybody who follows me on Twitter, I always want to apologize right away. I'm so sorry.
So let's talk a little bit about crypto. You were recently tweeting about cryptocurrencies. How do you see that continuing to disrupt payments and, especially retail?
I think the thing that I find most fascinating about, and I'm not even talking about, it's sort of trendy to say, well, I'm not really talking about crypto or Bitcoin, I'm talking about blockchain. Blockchain is fascinating, distributed ledger, fascinating. But if we just look at things like crypto and Bitcoin, going all the way back again, talking about how we thought we knew the limits of things, that's on the technology side. But to think that we didn't know the limits of what currency means, what making currency, printing currency, issuing currency, the fact that we didn't understand how that would change, that we would now have this non-fiat, semi-currency kind of a security, not really sure what it does, how it works, all of that fun stuff. There would now be, I think we were talking about this earlier, it's like $14,000, $15,000 a Bitcoin. That to me, I think, is what's so utterly fascinating about this. Payments is very, very old. People have been paying for things for a very long time. And the fact that just within the last 7 or 8 years we've redefined what it means to have a currency, that we've redefined what it is to have a transaction, that to me is utterly fascinating, and that we are in the middle of all of this stuff. Even now, when we thought we had all of our, kind of all of this figured out, the fact that we're redefining all of that, I find it utterly fascinating and completely and totally perplexing as well. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody who says that they've got it all figured out, no, they don't. And nor should they. I mean, the hope is that we will continue to use these cryptocurrencies and that we'll continue to use the technologies underneath them to do some really amazing things.
Yeah. So, outside of the industry, being an expert in payments, so as a consumer, yesterday walking down the street here in New York, and, I saw a sign, it said 0.00832 Bitcoin to eat at our buffet. So as consumers, I think there's still a little bit of the, the sentiment. It's a little skeptical. People joke about it.
I would hope there is a healthy skepticism towards it, but that's just it. As an analyst, I try to come at everything with a healthy dose of skepticism. But what's interesting about that is somebody who is saying, that's a merchant who's saying, if a consumer wants to use a payment method, it's our job to accept whatever it is and however they want to pay. And that's the way you should be as a merchant. Make whatever it is that somebody wants to pay with, whether it's one of the card brands, whether it's a debit network, whether it's cash, check, however it is, make it easy. And the fact that somebody was actually putting a price up there, I think they would probably need to have a dynamic pricing, though, that would go up and down depending upon what the daily rate is. It tends to be a little volatile these days.
Yes, yeah, and we, on our Twitter feed, at Verifone, when we announce something with a partner, we always get the reply but when are you going to accept Bitcoin? When is it going to, what about Ripple? And,
yeah.
So kind of going down the list, and it's just a matter of time. But consumer sentiment, I think, is still a little.
I think so. That again, blockchain, distributed ledger, very interesting use cases. But if you just go to Bitcoin and crypto, I don't know that it actually solves a lot of problems right now in payments, or the problems it solves are not the type of problems that are a business to consumer issue, more like a B2B, cross-border settlement, that kind of stuff. I could see more use cases there. I just don't know if I see it as a real serious solution to any issues that consumers are having. And if somebody were to say to me, oh, nope, here's that use case, I might change my mind. I will say, though, it's great that it now provides, you said, outside of the industry. When I am at a family event, holidays just passed, it actually does provide something relatively interesting for me to talk about with people who don't really understand what a payment analyst does.
Yeah.
You're a payment analyst. Can you talk to me about Bitcoin? Yes, I can. So that family event is taken care of from a subject matter standpoint.
Yeah, and I think I saw, yesterday or a couple days ago on Twitter, because obviously if it's on Twitter, it's true.
Absolutely.
When the transact value of Bitcoin is, it might cost $2 for the cup of coffee, but it takes $10 in fees and the mining and producing it, so the total transaction value is way higher than what the product cost. So hopefully that will improve.
Well, and again, though, that's one of those things that is so amazing about the way we pay for things now, that I can hand over a piece of plastic to somebody for, $2.50 for a cup of coffee and a scone, and the fact that it does go through in microseconds, it's completely secure, the cost of that merchant is relatively small, and it gets rid of a lot of the headache and a lot of the hassle. In fact, that we've built up all of that infrastructure. And that's, I think, part of what we don't really pay much attention to. 100 years ago, would somebody have thought that transatlantic flight was going to happen? Well, no, not until you started putting in airports and rules and regulations and all of the stuff that makes planes now fly safely around the world. We have that same type of setup in payments. We have the equipment, we have the middleware, we have the networks, we have all of those things that connect all of those banks. So maybe someday there will be the same thing that will handle cryptocurrency. A discussion like this may look kind of funny in 10 years when people look back on it and say, oh, they couldn't believe this was going to happen. But I think the main thing, though, is that it still needs to solve that consumer problem, and I haven't seen it do that yet.
Yeah, we're getting there, though. I
think so. We'll see. We'll see. It does make it interesting and fun.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, James.
It's been a pleasure.
Looking forward to hearing more from you this year.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.